Chapter 14, Video 2. We were talking about people moving out to the west, and that is going to draw people to Texas as well. Now, Stephen F. Austin is going to follow a plan that his father had set up for Americans moving into the part of Mexico that now is Texas. By 1830, there were about 20,000 settlers, American settlers in that area, with about 1,000 slaves. And the Mexicans had said that they did not want us to bring slavery into their area. So they got angry about this. We were coming in too high numbers, and we were bringing in slaves, and so they cut immigration. Well, Americans kept moving into Mexico illegally, and within 5 years, the population had gone from 20,000 to 30,000 Americans in that area, and that was 10 times the Mexican population in that area. So things got more tense when Santa Anna became the dictator of Mexico. These Texicans, as they were called at the time, are going to rebel against Mexican authority, and Santa Anna is going to try to prevent that, and it'll lead to the War for Texas's independence. The most famous battle out of that is the Battle of the Alamo, which was a fort in San Antonio. There were famous people there like Davy Crockett, for example. This was in 1836, and roughly 189 or so Americans will stay in the fort and try to hold off the Mexican army, which was far, far more numbers, around 3,500 maybe. They're going to hold the fort for 12 days, which gave the Texan leadership time to form the Republic of Texas and have a constitution and an interim government, and to pick Sam Houston as the president of Texas and so forth. Now at the Alamo, every American fighter there was killed down to the last man. Now there were some women and some servants who were there who tell the story about it, but every American fighter there was killed, and then their bodies were burned. About 1,500 or so Mexican soldiers were killed. So Sam Houston is going to be the leader of both the Texas Army and the Texas government, and he will meet up against Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto River, and the Mexican army will be defeated soundly by the Texan forces, and Santa Anna will be taken prisoner. He will agree that Texas will be independent if we would just let him go, and as soon as we let him go and he crossed over the Rio Grande, then he recanted on that agreement and said that Texas was not independent. But the folks in Texas and the Republic of Texas had always wanted to become part of the United States, and so they'll immediately start talking about annexation. The Constitution that they had written for Texas included annexation. So they wanted to be brought into the United States. There will be some debate in Congress about it because Texas would come in as a slave territory. And so there was some discussion about that. In 1844, James K. Polk is going to be elected president, and he had campaigned saying that he would bring Texas into the United States. What's actually going to happen, though, is John Tyler is going to do it right at the tail end of his presidency with sort of the attitude of, well, it's going to happen anyway, I'll just take care of it. Now, Polk is going to have a lot to do with the shaping of our country as it is today, and he had certain goals that he wanted to accomplish, and among those were dealing with Oregon Territory and California, and he is going to deal with both of those issues. Now with Oregon, if we were to extend that 49th parallel through the Oregon Territory, the British and the United States would get about an equal amount, and that seemed to make sense to Polk. And so he asked the British if we could just extend that northern border and divide the Oregon Territory. The British said no, and so Polk, who seemed to be a bit of a Jackson figure, Andrew Jackson, who did what he wanted when he wanted, Polk is going to say, well, I'll just do it anyway. We'll just take all of the Oregon Territory. Well, the British didn't want to try to come over here and fight for their part of the Oregon Territory, and so then they backtracked and said, well, you know, maybe that 49th parallel is a good place to divide Oregon Territory. So that rounded out finished out that northern border across the United States. Now, Mexico did not agree on where the border would be. Mexico thought that the border between Mexico and the United States would be the Nueces River. The United States thought it was the Rio Grande, and while it did not look like these things, we're going to treat it like this. So the Mexicans thought the border was the Nueces, the Americans thought it was the Rio Grande, and you see in between there is this disputed territory where it had not been resolved whose land that was. Well, Zachary Taylor with the military was sent down to the border of Rio Grande, essentially to pick a fight. The Mexicans will attack at Palo Alto in that disputed territory, and 11 Americans will be killed. And folks who wanted to go to war over this issue said that Mexico had shed American blood on American soil, and so we are going to go to war in 1846 in what's called the Mexican War. Now, there were folks who didn't want to go to war, who opposed it in Congress and throughout the country. In fact, Lincoln is going to make several resolutions and speeches from the congressional floor where he is going to, they get called spot resolutions, where he wants to know exactly what spot American blood was shed on American soil. And this is also where we talked before about the transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau writing about civil disobedience, and he didn't want to pay the tax to pay for this war that he disagreed with. But we had to really step up our war preparations. We had a very small army that was no match for the numbers of the Mexican army, and so we're going to get a lot of enlistments into our army. They are going to be rough. They don't have uniforms. They're providing a lot of their own equipment and very little discipline, and a lot of the regular army leadership will spend a lot of time just trying to get them to behave besides just fighting the battles. The big war hero out of this will be Zachary Taylor, and there are a number of different battles. We're going to fight in California because that's where Mexican forces were. John C. Fremont is going to fight there and also declare the Republic of California. Stephen Kearny will fight and defeat the Mexicans there as well. Winfield Scott is going to do apparently some brilliant flanking around Mexico City, and Santa Anna is going to resign and flee the country. You can't trust him. You can never trust Santa Anna. We'll end up with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where Mexico gives up Texas and California and agrees, and part of what now is New Mexico, and agrees that the Rio Grande will be the border between Mexico and the United States. We paid Mexico $15 million, and we're going to pay some citizen claims as well. Now, this war is going to leave a little over 1,700 Americans dead, a little over 4,000 Americans wounded. Another 11,000 or so will die of disease, especially dysentery, out west. It counts as the deadliest war in American history when you look at the percentage of combatants killed. In this Mexican War, 110 soldiers out of every 1,000 were killed, and in the Civil War, it was 65 soldiers out of every 1,000 were killed. We also spent about $98 million on this war, got 500,000 square miles of land out of it.